these UFOs came to the missile silos and turned off the nukes. Illuminati is an extension of the mystery schools, which started way before Egypt even existed. It was from the land of Chem. A lot of these wars are all fabricated from the very beginning. In other words, when I say fabricate, I don't mean that people aren't dying and fighting, because they are fighting and dying. But even if you go back to the Civil War, you discover that it was funded on both sides.
So let's start with this. Recently, the Kazakhstani scientists have come forth with this paper talking about the number 37 that appears, they say, about 9 separate times in the human genetic coding. Yeah. And so they're saying, look, the coincidence like that, this would occur about 1 in 10 trillion times, right? So their whole thing is just based on this number 37 popping up so many times, they think it's a sign of intentional design. Does this look like vindication for the Anunnaki theory? Basically, there has been tampering and alien manipulation of the human genome.
Well, it definitely is evidence of tampering of the human genome, because to get that, like they said, it's 1 in a trillion. I mean, you'd have a better chance of winning the lottery every single day before this can actually happen just by happenstance in normal evolution. So what I think has really happened is, not only is it vindication that the Anunnaki came here and genetically modified the existing hominids on this planet, but I think even prior to the Anunnaki, there may have been other species visiting this planet and basically genetically encoding us as well. So even the existing hominid might have already been modified before the Anunnaki got here, and they may have just put the finishing touches on that modification, because I really do believe that Earth is like a gigantic laboratory.
Well, in fact, that's the argument made, is that on one hand, there are those who say the Anunnaki sky gods are the ones that created mankind, basically from some kind of sapien, right? Merging the sapien, right. Some kind of monkey creature with the alien to create a human. But then there's the other argument that says, wait a minute, the Anunnaki just were sort of the last ones to come to then manipulate the human genome, or maybe to limit it, and to basically create the modern human and then proclaim themselves our gods.
Right.
What's your take on that?
There's a couple of takes, because one is Neanderthal, who was thought now currently to be a lower IQ than a human. Some scientists are now coming forward saying, wait a minute, the actual Neanderthal may have actually been smarter than the modern day human, with more cranial space and so forth, and just some of the research. And smarter, not meaning do they know quantum physics, but they were more in tune with the planet, with the Earth. They were more in tune with nature. They may have had better access to their higher sensory perception. Like how animals can tell there's an earthquake coming and they get out of Dodge long before it comes, or the animals in the Philippines before the tsunami hit, the wild animals all left. So those type of intuitions and things, they may have been better tuned than the modern day human. But it really is showing that it's possible that even like the Ubaid culture, who was here prior to the Anunnaki, and those Ubaid statuettes have been discovered in Iraq, where they actually look like reptilian people. They're prior to the Anunnaki's arrival, or prior to the Sumerian civilization, I should say, and they actually depict humanoid reptilians, even breastfeeding. And these are some amazing artifacts that are real, that are actually in museums, and I actually have a replica of 2 of them at my house. One is a male and one is a female that's actually breastfeeding. Now, when the Anunnaki get here, they really want to take us to another level, but to make us subservient at the same time. So it's very possible that the main objective that they had was to make a slave race that would be subservient to them, that would worship them, and that would do all their bidding with no questions asked. And that's exactly what they achieved. Because
we are now delving into this realm of genetic modification ourselves, right? We're starting to actually understand the human genome, starting to do genetic modification on crops, on animals, potentially on humans. And does that then beg the question, did the Anunnaki modify us? Obviously, the texts talk about them using us as sort of slave labor, but did they modify us and actually then continue to live amongst the humans, but in a human form? Are they still here, basically?
I believe they're still here. I mean, going back even to the part where they genetically modified us potentially as slaves, it was very interesting the way that the Atrahasis epic describes the creation of mankind. Even when you go to the 7 tablets of creation in the Enuma Elish, one of the Anunnaki goddesses, basically, after many failed attempts of creating a perfect human that can replicate on its own, they actually had people here they were making in these cloning chambers, but they couldn't replicate on their own. They couldn't reproduce. Well, she said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an egg out of an existing hominid. I'm going to clean up the genetic material. We're going to put genetic material in from ourselves. I think it was Enki, actually, who donated his sperm. And then she put the zygote back in her own womb and then took it to full term. And that's when they actually created the first genetically perfected human, the more modern human that we are right now. Mm-hmm. In that, they also did something with the DNA because it's what they call junk DNA. Mm-hmm. That's where they disconnected the higher levels of consciousness and intellect to keep us at a specific level. But we still had long lifespans at that time. But the main goal that they did this, the reason why they started that whole project in the first place was because they were tired of doing all the labor on this planet, all the mining, all the farming and everything else. And so that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question you had asked was?
Whether or not the Anunnaki could still be living here amongst us, basically as our rulers, as the elite bloodlines, for example.
Now that's a very good question. Now, according to the Emerald Tablets, which were written by Thoth the Atlantean, who's actually the son of Enki, okay? So he's actually obviously younger than Enki. He has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. In the Emerald Tablets, he describes going into this chamber underneath the Great Pyramid called the Halls of Amenti. And in this chamber underneath the Great Pyramid, he actually says he's descended 100 times 10, which is 100,000 years. So every so many years, he goes down to this chamber for 100 years at a time. So over the course of so many eons, he's gone down there for 100,000 combined years. So the Sumerian text is only 6,000 years old as far as we know. So based on that, we'd have to think that these gods, these people, these beings could potentially still be alive, and they could be anywhere. They could be on Earth. There's some of their offspring, because we do know that Enki married or had made it with humans. Mm-hmm. Thoth also took on a human wife as well. And this bloodline could be still here today propagating. And I really believe that's the bloodline that started the Pharaonic bloodline, which then migrated after the last Pyramid War into Arabia and then into Europe. So the bloodline actually evolved over time, but they kept it along a specific route. When it got to Europe, it was the Plantagenet bloodline that is still ruling the planet until this day. And that Plantagenet bloodline is John Lackland's line. John Lackland is the King of England that signed the Magna Carta. But every single...
King John from...
Exactly.
From the Robin Hood legend.
Exactly, yes. Mm-hmm. And every president of the United States of America is related to John Lackland and that Plantagenet bloodline, which goes back to the Arabian kings, which goes back to the Egyptian pharaohs, which then goes back to the Sumerian kings list in Iraq. Think about that for a minute. The only one president that's not related to that bloodline is Van Buren.
So if we look at the nature of the Anunnaki society, and you talk about the Pyramid Wars, obviously the rivalry that existed between various blood, even though they were half brothers, for example, Anki and they were half brothers, but there's a rivalry between them, and then their children obviously having rivalry between them, and how the children are essentially lording over different cities, right? Yeah. Each city took on a personal god. What can we understand about the nature of what's happening on Earth to say that it doesn't seem like it's just one faction that's in total control. It does seem more of, yes, there are secret societies and elites, but it doesn't seem that they're always only, getting what they want. There does seem to be a bit of a conflict and a bit of a power struggle between the various, elite, Illuminati, if you want to call it.
Right.
How would you say that we can learn about what's happening on Earth and the power struggle on Earth based on Anunnaki society?
Oh yeah, it goes all the way back. If you look in the biblical times, you have Cain and Abel. And then you can go forth from there. You have Palestine and Israel. I mean, as you go up in time, you just see these scenarios where you have this conflict going on. In the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible, when you really analyze it and break it down, you begin to realize that these wars that are going on in Deuteronomy are actually individual gods or relatives in different cities sending human beings out, kind of like we do now, to war against other cities that they've never been to destroy and pillage and bring back the riches and so forth and so on, so that this particular entity or this god can take over that land, and now he's got expanded his kingdom. And this has been so embedded into the human culture, this style or this technique of conquer, divide, and acquire. And then you still have these bloodlines which are still here, even down the line. They're down the line, but they're still here, and they still have the same mentality, the same concept. The concept is to use humans as cattle, send them out, conquer, divide, and acquire. And and they're just battling each other back and forth. There are multiple secret societies warring against each other. One of the most famous ones really right now currently is you have the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, and then you have George Soros. He has his own little society, and then you have the Rockefellers. They go head to head. I mean, Soros has done so many undermining things to them, and they've done so many undermining things to him. They've both crashed economies just on their own word and decisions that they've made in banking and so forth. But they're in a little battle as well. And even George Soros is in a battle with the United States, an undermining battle where he does things to undermine the United States dollar and things like that. So those in secret wars or behind the scenes wars are still going on till this very day.
what can we learn about the Illuminati from Anunnaki religion? Because the Illuminati is interesting in the sense that we know from from Weishaupt's intentions. Many people would actually say, look, actually he's very positive. He's talking about revolution against kings and against organized religion, and basically he's talking about like freeing people's thought and having having to do this obviously through secret societies because of the nature of the time. If you wanted free thought at the time of the Inquisition, obviously they would kill you for this. So what can we say about the nature of the Illuminati as far as is it a sort of an extension of any kind of Anunnaki religion, or maybe in opposition to Anunnaki religions?
Okay, the Illuminati is an extension of the mystery schools, which started way before Egypt even existed. It was from the land of Chem. In the Emerald Tablets, the first thing that Thoth does, his dad, it starts on Atlantis, the actual island itself. Thoth's dad sends him to the land of Chem. He gets in a ship, and he says he rises up, and then he actually lands on Chem. When he gets out, there's barbarians. His job is to bring them to a higher level of civilization. From there, when they get to a certain level, he opens up the mystery schools, and he begins to teach these people the higher things, dimensions, technology, quantum physics, all the stuff that they need to know, the universe and everything else, how the things work, even to a higher level, talking about even manipulating the ether through vibrations and thought. So these mystery schools maintained for many, many years, and they were for invitation only, but they were for enlightenment of the race. Over time, as some of these gods left and disappeared, like Thoth, for example, after he was gone, he became a deity. He wasn't a deity when he was here. He was a deity after he left, and many years after he left. And then all of a sudden, the pyramid priests figured out, oh wow, we can use this as a control method. So that was the beginning of one of the very first secret societies, was the mystery schools. When the gods left, Thoth left, Enki left, and it was able, okay, now we can manipulate this, we can use this on the people. And they began using it against the people for many different things. And it evolved over many years. So even though the Illuminati maybe started up as another branch to say we need to do this because we're trying to create our own revolution, but then again, it always turns out to be the same thing, control and manipulation, same with religion, same with politics. It always turns into a control factor.
And in terms of religion, it does. Obviously, we've heard people who proclaim that we're reaching the end times, right? There's a lot of symbols around, the nature of the trumpet. The trumpets are flaring, and we're entering Revelations, and then this whole thing about Russia and China, obviously conflict with Russia and China and the U.S. being part of this, book of Revelation. Do you believe that this is basically a script that's being played out as, according to what's been set down by the controllers of religion, to say the idea is to create basically another nuclear war or some kind of genocidal thing to get rid of large parts of the population?
It's possible, but I have a slightly bit of a different take on it. I think that a lot of these wars are all fabricated from the very beginning. In other words, when I say fabricate, I don't mean that people aren't dying and fighting, because they are fighting and dying. But even if you go back to the Civil War, you discover that it was funded on both sides by the same group. And every war thereafter, including World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, that was the whole lie, the Gulf of Tonkin lie that started the whole Vietnam. It's all about profits, money, and control, and keeping the people fighting each other. And they really see human beings as cattle. They don't care if we destroy each other, wipe each other out to a certain point. They'll pull back when they need to keep a specific amount here. But when you go into the ancient Sumerian text, you find that Enlil himself, when the people started getting too loud and too obnoxious, he would say, cull the humans, cull them, put a plague out there. But they had weather control, because he said, dry the fields out, no food will grow for a year or two. And he'd kill them off that way. They'd send people to these wars that didn't make any sense. So they had the ability to do this back then, and it's still progressing into this current day. I don't think there's gonna be a nuclear war that will end everything, because they're not that dumb. And I think, based on what I've seen in 2010 from the Disclosure Project, which actually broadcast live on CNN, you had all those military soldiers from the 1960s and 70s come forward and say that these UFOs came to the missile silos and turned off the nukes. So I don't think we're gonna see a nuclear war. I just think it's a lot of theater, and that theater generates revenue.
If you enjoyed this, make sure to watch the next video on Awaken Zone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, but you won't want to miss what's coming next.